So, Cormac, you want to share your what is that?
So this episode is brought to you by a new mug.
It's sponsored by
Really?
the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation. All of a sudden,
The,
are we?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
new
No,
mug,
we're not.
new
I just
nerd.
want to be clear. We're actually not. And so Cormac is sponsoring
Although,
the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation.
although, if they would like to,
We're here.
Evan's phone number is,
Send inquiries to Evan at archispeakpodcast.com.
yeah. Well, new mug.
You got to look at the YouTube,
If
people. Like, if you want to see the mug, you got to look at the YouTube. Just for the
the
audio listeners
mug.
out there.
So if anybody is interested, the mug is a just a graphic of the stage curtain from Taliesin, the one in Wisconsin, not the West.
Yeah, I was like
And
I was at the little theater they have at Taliesin West, and it's just like a dark maroon fuzzy
yeah,
curtain. It's just like a normal
yeah.
curtain. So I'm a little jealous
Now
that
the
they
way
have such a cool curtain at Taliesin.
they do, it's actually I was really I was kind of smitten by it. I've got a magnet.
You're
I
like, don't
got
look at the
a
leaking building.
picture.
Don't look at the
Yeah,
super leaky
exactly,
building. Like, just
exactly.
wow, that curtain's amazing.
Well, so the theater itself, it just reopened, and it after a long renovation, and so that one actually doesn't leak. Everything else there leaks, but that one doesn't. And yeah, so actually, spring break for my daughter, we decided to take a trip down to Florida, and I dropped her off at Busch Gardens so that she could ride roller coasters. And I said, "You're going to have fun, and I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to go for a small little drive out to Lakeland, and I'm going to go to Florida Southern." And then I decided to also go and visit Florida Polytechnic, which is where the recently opened, I can't say it's new, but it's newer Santiago Calatrava building is. Which, if you want me to even remotely say anything about it, Evan
I think we want to save this
is
for its own
okay.
episode, because there's a
Yeah, we'll
lot to
talk
say
about
about
that
it.
because
There's a lot to say,
there,
right?
there is. And
Okay.
you forced me into revealing some of its secrets.
I I have I have kind of an analogous thing that I could show, and then you could show that, and so now I think we just want to foreshadow heavily that
Ooh,
that will be a fun episode to do. So
there you go.
yeah, comparing
Yeah.
various methods of structuralizing a building. Let's just hint
So
at it
I'm
that way.
so I'm not sure why you wanted to call me out on my muck, but
I,
here's my
I
mug
thought I
anyway.
just thought you'd want to show it off because a few episodes ago I was showing off my Archispeak podcast mug, and yours is cooler looking.
Yeah, mine's broke. We need to.
Your old Archispeak mug is gone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We
that's
need
what
to
glue
reopen
is
the
for.
store there.
Sustainability. Yeah, maybe we should reopen the store. People, let us know if we should reopen the store. Do you want some Archispeak merch? All right, so we have a new thing that we've announced a couple of times, and that is the askarchispeak.com website, where listeners of the show, you, dear listeners, can submit a question to be answered on the show. And we had a couple of questions come in. These were big, long questions. And so I'm like, I know who wrote these questions, and let's just have him come on the show and talk about these things, because like there's a lot to this, and I our guest in this episode has a lot of thoughts about this already, which I think will heavily contribute to the conversation. And so, Chad Clary, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me. I was not expecting to come on when I submitted
But
questions.
then I asked you, and you said yes, and
Well,
here you are. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
so
it's your own damn fault.
yeah, and
usually is.
and Chad, to be quite honest with you, he already gave away why he invited you is because they were really long questions and he didn't want to read them.
Yeah.
So he
I'm gonna
wanted
have
you to.
okay. And now I'm just gonna type into my AI chatbot named Chad. Hey, Chad, can you please re-ask the question right here on the podcast? But we'll get into that in just a second. I just thought it would be cool to tell everybody how Chad and I met, which was at the
Yeah.
AEC Acoustics Leadership Conference last fall in Melrose, Florida. And that's a small conference put on by Phil Reed and Adam Thomas from Reed Thomas, which is also where Chad now works, which is a
That is true.
more recent development. And
Cool.
I believe we talked about that on this show, Cormac. If Cormac, obviously, as he just stated, has ties to Florida. He just went there for fun. And I was there.
Mm.
You had fun. You went out. You did your architectural field trip,
I had fun. I had a blast.
and you enjoy. I mean, you consider yourself a Floridian at least like what 50%, 40%. Like, what's the percentage of Floridian that you consider yourself?
Well, I'll tell you, last night I was at school talking to some students and it was starting to rain and they're like, Cormac, you should probably leave so that you can beat the rain. And it was already coming down. I was like, I'm a Floridian. I know how to drive in the rain. So I admit to it when it's convenient.
Yeah.
And then when
And then you see those
have read
headlines: Florida man does this, right? And you're like,
yeah, I told a client something about my past as a child growing up in Florida, and they're like, "These are like the stories of Florida man." I'm like, crap. Now Cormac
are
is considered
Florida
Florida man.
anyway.
I'm Florida man.
All right. So Chad and I
Yeah,
met in
it's a big
Florida
chat.
in the fall at this nice little what it's like an unconference, right? And it was a leadership conference. It's a very cool conference.
A retreat.
It's a retreat, and we got to do cool stuff every day at the lake and hang out, and it's super low key. And anyway, that's where I got to know Chad a little bit. And then Chad writes in with this question. Chad, you want to just kind of summarize the question, and then we'll see where this goes?
Sure. Do you want me to introduce myself first?
I was going to say,
I would love it.
where's your decorum?
I'm not a
Evan?
professional. Yeah.
I mean, I'm fine just being Chad, but yeah. So as Evan said, my name is Chad, and I work at Reed Thomas now. Been there a little over a year. Prior to that, spent just under 20 years in architectural office, doing a little bit of everything: CDs, PM, PA, CA, and then ended up kind of more on the technical BIM manager side of things, full time. Last 5 or 6 years I was there. And prior to that, got my B Arch from Kentucky, took the long way through, dropped out for a while, came back because I realized the real world was dumb and was better off with a degree so I could go face the real world. And here I am now.
Interesting. So just explain what Reed Thomas is and what you do there, because it sounds like you've split away from architecture, but you haven't, right?
No, not completely. So Reed Thomas is, I'm going to butcher this, basically a third-party consultant. And Adam Thomas, who's my boss, he said basically our job is to make your job easier. So we work with architects, engineers, product manufacturers, general contractors, developers to do pretty much what they need. We do project support. We can do modeling, documentation, templates, content creation. Worked on some marketing images for manufacturers, building like mock-up walls and kind of tear them apart. You see those pictures because those are way more informative than just a plain section.
Mm-hmm.
Do reality capture. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of the app development. There's
You guys
half
do a
the
lot of
office
things.
are
It's
developers,
all tech-based stuff. And
Yes.
But what's interesting about like what you just said, all those things, Chad, when you were getting your degree at UK, like was this was not a thing that you could have done when you graduated school back then, right? It wasn't like, I mean,
No.
there's so many jobs in architecture now that it was never like that when we were in school, right? It was always like, you can do 3 things. You can do the design. Basically you can do the design. But then there was project managers and there was like technical people. And now it's
CAD manager.
Yeah. And so now it's like, wow, there's so, and so I was just wondering, like, could you, if you look back and told yourself that you'd be doing this, that you would probably be like, what? I mean, that's crazy.
No, not in this degree. I know when I was a kid, I always thought it'd be really cool to be an Imagineer at Disney,
Yeah.
which would be a similar. You're touching everything because they draw, they paint, they
model, yeah,
model, they design buildings, they animatronics, So this is kind of like that, but
like
not quite as fanciful.
architects get to draw toilet rooms, like Disney early interns for Imagineers get to draw line cues for the they get to draw the maze of lines to get into the haunted mansion when they're remodeling that.
It's funny, Chad, that I actually had aspirations to be an Imagineer as well. I grew up, as obviously you heard me say, I grew up in Florida, and I had friends that worked in at Disney, and so we were there practically every weekend or at least once a month.
It was way cheaper back then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't
or
afford
free
to do that now. Or free.
or free.
Yeah.
I'm not giving away their secrets. They got us in.
Nice.
And so it was great. And I'm not saying anybody's name, but I have been,
Past the statute of
underneath
limitations.
Yeah, I've been underneath Disney. I've
I've
seen
been-
the world underneath the
You've
world.
been in the secret tunnels?
I have been in the secret tunnels.
I mean, maybe not so secret.
So
Yeah.
yes. So and honestly, it was captivating. It sounds like you and I've had some interesting similarities in our start stops in education, desire to be Imagineer. I mean, when you go there, you're just like, man. And in fact, I've even had some projects that I've worked on that I kind of call it like the Disneyfication of X or Y or Z. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to say what those projects are because,
Times Square.
shouldn't.
There you go. Yeah. Vegas. Yeah. The whole city. Well, okay. So thanks for sharing like kind of that, what would you call that? I guess that's just your intro, but your origin story there, a little bit of it at least. And so
Yeah, a little bit of it.
let's talk about your question and kind of where it came from, where this idea come from, and then what is it?
My big conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
So the original question, the simple version is, why don't buildings have credits? Because if you think about it, it's a very creative project that involves dozens to hundreds of people, same as a movie or a video game or a music album, which all have credits. In the album, it's in the liner notes. Movies and games, it's at the end. And it was during COVID, was playing a game and finished it, and the credits popped up, and there was a little note, oh, we finished this during COVID with all the isolation. And I don't remember if the credits were skippable. That might be why I actually sat through them. But I ended up just watching the credits, and it was the usual like art directors and programmers. And then it went on, it's like, oh, and here's our lawyers, and here's their admin assistants, and here's our dogs.
Wow.
And it was just one of those, it's like, wait, why doesn't architecture do this? So that was kind of the thought process, and it's just stuck with me. So
What's interesting is think about this. Think about how many times you've been to either a grand opening or a groundbreaking or things like that. And Evan has a certain term for this, and I'm going to let him say it. But where is usually the architect in all of this? Most, 9 times out of 10, they're sitting down in the back or something, or not invited or whatever. And
Yeah,
what is
not
that
even
ceremony called?
invited.
Evan, what's that ceremony called?
It's called the ceremony of the uninvolved. Yes. Because it's
And
the
it sounds about
mayor
right.
and the city council member and the,
Right.
it's the lieutenant supervisor of the assistant to the assistant manager of this and that. And they're out there with the giant scissors or the golden shovel or whatever it is.
Right.
And they're doing this thing and they're shaking hands and handing out plaques and all this stuff. And yeah, like the recognition is very odd in that moment because it's like we're talking about this physical thing right here. And what
Right.
they're talking about is the bureaucracy it took to get there and how they were involved in that part of it, right?
Right.
And not the actual creation of the thing. Usually it's like that, like Cormac said, the architect isn't even invited to this one.
Well, but
Yeah.
I mean, to kind of Chad's point, you're reading the credits, and
that's part of it. too.
they are thanking everybody, and that's fine. I mean, there's a whole village that it takes to create this, right? I mean, we aren't the ones who come up with the idea for the project. I mean, the clients come to us, and they're as much recognized as we should be. And so when I saw the question, and Evan was like, "Oh yeah, don't forget, and we'll be talking to Chad tonight." I was like, what was interesting about that and timely is when I went back to refresh my memory on the question. I went into, so when I was down in Florida, I went into his art museum in downtown Lakeland, and for some reason I was just kind of captivated by the building. I mean, there was a lot going on. There was the original building that was very postmodern, and then there was the addition that was done, which is very contemporary modern. And there's a lot of like things competing for attention in the facade of this building. And I think I sent you took an image of it and sent it to Evan, and I was just like, I don't know why, but I'm completely captivated by this thing. And I go in and I ask all of the different people who are working there, hey, do you guys have any idea who did this building? And they're like, no idea, but if you like walk around the corner, there's a little alcove underneath the stairs that has the model. And I was like, oh, cool. Well, of course I'm going to go take a look at that. And I took a couple of photographs of it and looked at the model. But what I realized is as I was walking around the corner to get to this place, they had a plaque. And the plaque did basically say, thanks to such and such and such and such and such and such. And at the very bottom, it did acknowledge the architect and it acknowledged the contractor. Mm. And so I actually got to, nobody knew who did it. All the people who probably walked past that plaque 1,000 times probably have never looked at the plaque to acknowledge like all of the people who were involved with it. But it was on the old portion of the building, not the new portion. And I'm working on a building right now, and we're getting close to completion of like the main lobby and things like that. And I'm thinking to myself, there's going to be no plaque. When I walked past that plaque, I was thinking to myself, I don't remember the last time any project that I've ever worked on, and they're large projects, has ever had a plaque that says who's done it. And I remember like the old like 50s and 60s, like modernist, like school campuses, elementary schools, whatever. And they would have that plaque in there. And even that was like, that was credit enough, I guess. That was the end credits for us enough. Is like, okay, here's a building. Oh yeah. And here's the people who did it, kind of thing. And now we don't even get that.
Yeah.
And
I've seen cornerstones occasionally.
Yeah.
But yeah, plaques, the only plaques I've seen are usually like the city council and the mayor and the developer and the bank. It's not anyone that actually did work.
It's funny that you say that. It's like I've seen, and I dragged Evan around a couple of times on some Frank Lloyd Wright buildings, and there's a lot of cornerstones that have like architect Frank Lloyd Wright on there and stuff like that. And the only reason that they're probably there, other than the fact that is he designed it. He designed his own acknowledgement of I did this building.
Right, totally. I'm looking for a photo right now, Cormac, from architectural tours. I have a picture on my phone, which is not helpful. I'm going to try to find it on my computer so I can show you guys this. And it is a plaque. And Cormac, maybe you can kind of talk about this for a minute because you probably remember it. But remember when we visited the Barnes Foundation in Philly?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, Billy Chen and Todd Williams actually do put plaques on their buildings, and sometimes it's just a kind of a bas relief. It's kind of a concept model, a partie diagram, something like that could be cast into a concrete panel or something. This was like a stainless steel plaque. And I'm going to try to find it and pull it up because it has a lot of names on it. And so to Chad's point, but I think this was probably driven by the architecture firm that did it, right? In this case, Billy Chen and Todd Williams.
Yeah. Well, and so I'm trying to think of like all of these other buildings that I've been to recently that are like famous architects. And most of them are because they have some significance to history, is why there's a plaque there. Is why there's some acknowledgement of who's there. But if you think about like all of the other buildings that were done, it's becoming fewer and far between for that kind of acknowledgement that here's who was involved, or here's unless you were a donor, and I've designed many a donor wall where you get like, our money helped pay for this building. Like, yes, but my blood, sweat, and tears did.
What's a couple of all-nighters?
Here it is.
Oh, wow.
There you go.
And so it's not a complete photo, but this is the best I have. But you can see it actually has the date. I'm assuming that's like the date of the opening, kind of the the ribbon cutting ceremony. It has little diagrams of the building on it, and it has names, and I don't know if I can zoom. I can't zoom in on this, but yeah, you can see lots and lots of names in here. And for all I know, these are donors. Like I actually, oh no, it actually says design and construction of it, and so it actually still could be donors, right? For all I know, I mean it is an art museum, but it does say in recognition of the individuals in design and construction. So this is a pretty cool little piece of evidence that I happen to recall having on my phone. But it made an impact when I was there, and it was just out kind of in the open. It wasn't hidden under a stairwell. It was out in the courtyard in the middle of the whole project, and it's there for everybody to see. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the only one I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, not to that level of detail at all.
I mean, it's obviously they put some thought into it. I'm sure they had an intern design it, but who knows?
It's better than detailing the bathroom.
Right. So what would it actually take? I mean, I've worked in firms that don't credit anybody in any of their marketing materials about any of their projects because it's a firm project, and the firm, all those individuals work for the firm. And I think what you're saying is like firms aren't like company, like there's no such thing as like a company. It's like the people. It's the people who were there. It's the people who did the thing, right? Like their talent, their experience, their role, their skills, all those things went into actually making it happen. And why don't we acknowledge those people for that thing, for that moment in time? And I do find it odd that many firms, because of their brand and their identity, obviously, like they actually just put the firm name on it and say designed by whatever architects.
It's interesting that you say that because there are websites that I've been to from other architecture firms, and even one that I worked for in the past that has acknowledged, like my involvement on a project, and I'm not even at that firm anymore. And they could easily have like scrubbed me from that. And then there's, and then there's others that they don't even acknowledge anyone, exactly like you're saying. And it's just, it's kind of a shame that like, there is, unless it's like the late night marauding of the server to get your projects off of there when you're looking for a new job or whatever it is that you
put your portfolio together.
Or pillaging and getting your portfolio together, that is any record of like you or acknowledgement of you working on it. It's like, look, see here, drawn by, and here's my CP, or something like that.
In the title block. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the closest thing you get to acknowledgement that you worked on it is like your initials, and it'd be like, oh, that could have been, anybody else. But that, it's kind of a shame that even firms don't acknowledge like all of the people who work on those. And it's not all of them. I have seen plenty of people get acknowledged, but like it almost should be almost a profession standard is like if somebody worked on the project, they should get acknowledgement.
But how deep should it go? Like to Chad's point, right? Like you have the lawyers.
That's
and the
where
dogs
it gets confusing.
We were watching, what was the latest Marvel movie that just came out? We went and we watched it, and they were rolling all of the credits, and
people watch them now because of the extra scenes.
Well,
right?
because they know that they're going to be the mid credit scene or the end credit scene, and you get through there and you're watching it, and just like you were saying, it's they're thinking of the lawyers, they're thinking of the dogs. This was just like all of the babies that were born while making of this movie, and it's just like having some like random baby's name come floating by and stuff. And so if they acknowledge all of them, they should at least acknowledge all the creators and like anybody, the toilet room detailer.
Well, even if you just look at a high level, you've got architectural, civil, electrical, fire protection, interiors, low voltage, mechanical, plumbing, structural, possibly a door window consultant, storefront, circulation, et cetera. You've got 30 different people, and that's before you get into specifics like the mason.
Mm-hmm.
That's just high level.
Yeah.
So it's that there's a lot, but it might only be one person from the door window consultant.
We were talking about trades and how, the sense of pride for a tradesman is to drive past a project and them like look back to their kids and say, "Hey, Daddy worked on that," or "Hey, Mom worked on that." And even them, I mean, they've got that sense of pride. I mean, anybody who's worked on it. I mean, the thing that in one of our previous episodes was talking about, a kid who was kind of like a little beside himself because he had to do a group project. He was just like, I'm planning on being a sole practitioner. And I was like, even if you're a sole practitioner, you will never work on a project where you are the only person that ever works on that project. You are not the only hand that has an effect on that project. There are so many hands that are going to be helping you along the way. And you need to recognize and understand that. So you need to learn how to work as a team, work together as a group. And so like everything from the client all the way down to the locksmith that reset the lock so that you could hand the key to the owner should be acknowledged in the fact that they had some part to play in the creation of this building, of this space, of this place that everybody sweat over.
Whose job would this be? Who would do this? Would it have to be the architects that kind of
the intern, of
keep
course,
track of all this? They would lay out the plaque.
Yes.
How big this could be? Cover a whole wall. I think. I mean, I just kind of think about the amount of work that this actually is, and maybe that's why they don't do it.
But now, I mean, like multimedia, you could have a screen with the credits
running
rolling
all the time.
Exactly.
The
and if
most
you
boring screen in the building. Yes.
You could have a few little like splashes and
Easter eggs.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because I guarantee if I put that together, there would be Easter eggs in it.
Yeah.
Or what would be
if
great
you're actually
is if
reading this. Yeah.
What would be cool about this is if you did something like that you had like still images or some film that was taken during the process all the way through, from client meetings all the way through like bricklaying and everything else, and then you just kind of create it and it's scrolling, but you have like images and movies behind it and it's scrolling, and so you can like look and see, oh, there I am.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Let's start okay, well, we're going to hang up now. We're going to start a side business.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We'll just
I'm
be
in.
the credits consultants. Yes.
Exactly. There you go. Construction credit consulting.
I'm sure in film there's a company that's their job. I'm pretty sure it is.
I mean, that's the model, right? Is look at how do they do that? How do they pull that together? How do they make sure they get it right? How do they get all the spelling right? And because there's a lot of turnover on projects too, right? There's so many people who just dip in and dip out. They're part of the planning process. They retire. There's all of those
or
things.
There's someone gets pulled in for 2 days because the drawing has to go out.
Yeah. So I'm the one who like has the head in the clouds here. So like now I'm starting to think about this and think about like as this is going through. This is also a way to kind of memorialize everything that's gone into a building, because so many people just don't understand the whole process and what it really means, and like how architects are involved with it, how contractors are involved with it and stuff. And you'd have this like memorial scroll with all of the people's names on it and stuff. It really can kind of like put almost a value that we seem to be very, very hard at explaining. What's the value of an architect? What's the value of people think that, oh, if I see a building, it's just this person or that person who's brought it into fruition. And you, yes, give all props to the contractors, because yes, they take our paper and turn it into reality. But, to get to that point, there's, the architects, there's all the engineers, there's the one kid who on his summer internship came in and had to like pick up all the red lines on the toilet room plans. All of these people should be acknowledged. And it would be kind of fun to do something like that really tells the story of the creation of the building. And
Unfortunately,
now,
it's the story nobody would read, I think. I mean, it honestly.
I would. But I also, I'm also the one that goes to the museum and takes a picture of the staircase. So
exactly. Yeah.
multiple staircases.
In fact, I had that museum in Lakeland. I was taking a picture of the stairs. It was this beautiful steel and wood and glass stair that was kind of in the interstitial space between the old and the new. And I had to put a little bit of ArcaSpeak into the ArcaSpeak podcast there. Sorry, Evan. But and it was just, but I mean, this lady and her daughter are like looking at me like, what the hell's wrong with this guy?
Who's the weirdo?
Except like, ooh, look.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
We went to a CEU session that was one of the interiors companies did, and it was at the Angels Envy Distillery, which, because I'm in Louisville,
Okay.
which is, bourbon central.
Yep.
So the distillery's just downtown, and we went, and the office I was at, we just did not deal with interior stuff, carpets and wallpaper and all that. But it's like, all right, free snacks, and I get to leave the office early because it's a CEU.
Yeah.
And I spent the whole time taking pictures of the building, to the point where one of the people that was there, it's like, you haven't paid attention at all, but you've taken pictures of everything in the building. It's like, oh yeah. It's like, because that's what's interesting.
Yeah.
And I have a folder of pictures on my phone of building pictures, and it's frequently stuff that's wrong.
Yeah.
Because I scroll through, and I can show someone's like, look, this is what you're designing. Don't do it.
Interesting.
This is bad.
So what's funny is I actually have a whole roll of glamour shots from Florida Southern, which is the campus that Frank Lloyd Wright designed. So I've got the glamour shots, but then I also have the horror shots. It's just here's how it's pretty, but
lots of
here's the
horror
setting.
shots.
Yeah, lots of horror shots.
Or just reference pictures, like, oh, that's how that goes together, or that's a good detail.
Absolutely.
So if you have this running list of credits for the building, and somebody like really screws something up, like you're going to be removed from the list.
Yeah,
you're
100%.
You're not on the list.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, they get a special call out. They get their name on the picture. Cormac did this.
Yeah.
It cost us 2 days.
Yeah. This change order was brought to you by Cormac.
I think it would be great.
Well, I mean, it's interesting also to think about something that you talked about when we chatted about this beforehand, was like this idea of like budget, right? It's like buildings cost a lot of money, but so do these movies, so do these video games.
Yeah.
Like, and so again, if you're kind of comparing these things to each other, there is some like a reasonable budget for all of these types of things, and yet you always see this list of individuals attached to media, but not physical architecture.
Yeah, because I did very, very cursory research, if we could call it that.
Search. You did search, not research.
I did a search, not an AI search. I actually went to websites to look this up. So like movie budgets are 100 to 200 million was a good average based on this website I found. And studios self-report budgets, I'm pretty sure, so who knows how correct they are.
Right.
Buildings are easily 10 million plus, depending on what you're looking at. And video games, like GTA 6, I've heard estimates, because they're not going to share their numbers, anywhere from like 500 million to 2 billion for a video game.
Wow.
Now, granted, it's been in development for like 10 years, but like that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And think about all the people who are actually involved with all of that.
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
You guys familiar with the original Macintosh? So this is the only thing I can actually think of where it's like there's this thing, and Apple would never do this today, right? But it's like this brand new idea of a computer, and they designed a computer in a case, right? Like the whole thing was like all self-contained. You guys can imagine what it looks like, and it has a little 5-inch screen or something, and a floppy.
The old
floppy disk
2D.
drive. Yeah, like the original Macintosh, right? Black and white screen.
Yeah. I learned how to draft on that.
But the cool thing that I think this is really cool, and it totally speaks to this idea, is like inside the case, all the people who worked on that project's names are in the mold for the case itself. Like,
oh, that's cool.
When they designed the mold, everybody signed, and they actually put it into the mold and made it so that on the inside it looks like all their names are carved out of the inside of the case. So if you pull that case off, but it's on the inside, like who's going to pull the case off? But when you do, it's like, oh, that's cool. Like there's a personal touch to that.
Well, I don't know if either one of you have been involved with, but I mean, we do topping out ceremonies where,
where you sign the bean.
you know, that last bean that's being placed, everybody signs that last bean.
There you go.
And gets put in place.
Not
so
everybody,
it's sort of that
Cormac.
Not everybody.
Everyone that's there.
Everybody that they can like wrangle in.
I've done that with Habitat.
Oh, cool.
If you go to Habitat and you're there prior to like drywall being installed, people sign the studs all the time. And I actually have on one of the walls in my house, someone wrote the date of 1921. 21. I think it's 21.
A little time capsule.
There's no name, but they wrote the date.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
That's cool. It's cool, like a time capsule. You find it later. You're like, oh, like my son hid some Matchbox cars in one of the walls here when we were remodeling. Like we had a hole cut out to run some plumbing through a wall. He stuffed a car in there. He's like, I hope somebody finds this someday.
Oh yeah, that would be cool.
Or it's just like, I wonder why the house just short circuited.
Yeah.
Car touches the White House.
Is it a die cast or a plastic one?
It was die cast, but it was plumbing. Yeah. It was like,
oh, yeah, you're fine.
We're fine.
Right.
We're fine. I don't know what to do about this, because I feel like this is one of those jobs that, like, once you get into it, it's way bigger than you thought it was.
Oh, of course.
But it would be cool. I mean, I think, there's like the Internet Movie Database, right? IMDb. And I'll go there to look up who's been in a film, or who wrote this, or what other films did they direct, or whatever. And it becomes this cross-referenceable thing. And I actually have a couple credits in there. But it's like this kind of a thing where it's like that's part of that industry, right? That industry is built on participation and contribution to projects. And that's how you build a reputation in the industry, at least with like what you've done. Maybe it's not who you are, right? But it's what you've done. And I feel like there's room in architecture, because it's not unlike that. People jump from firm to firm. What did you do on a project? Yeah. You show something in your portfolio. Well, what did you actually do in that project? And it seems to me like databases, the world of data that we swim in nowadays, it should be a lot easier than to actually do this, but also for a good reason, right? More than just vanity, more than just ego, right? To have your name on a project. It's like, well, here's what we did. Here, this was my role on the project.
That's good if you're writing a resume too. I don't remember the names of all the projects I've worked on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
20 years. I remember the 5 or 6 that I have on my resume.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, and you have my kind of like little fascination with kind of like this kind of like diagram in my head of like this architect worked for this architect, and now this architect is like
the family tree of architecture.
Yeah, the family tree of architects. Because listening to all of these biographies and stuff that I've been listening to recently, there's this like one common thread with a lot of like the ones been listening to Korb and Gropius and Mies and all of these other ones. And they were all draftsmen in Peter Barron's office. And it was just kind of interesting to like hear, it's like, wait, who are all these different people? And it's just like, oh yeah, Marcel Breuer was here, and this person was here, and then it's just like that family tree then grows into a different family tree of like branches start to grow, and then like these people worked for this guy, and then these people work for this guy. And here in Detroit, when you start thinking about like Albert Kahn and who worked for Albert Kahn, and there's like this whole massive family tree of like firms that grew out of it, like Smith Group and other ones that that they were draftsmen at Kahn, and now they're like big names, and it's just like who worked for them and all this other. It's kind of interesting, so it's like we need to have an ancestry.com for architects. I mean, none of the
probably
students
be
would ever
information
pay.
in there that should never be seen.
I'm not saying, and
I'm just saying it's incestuous. I'm just going to say it.
And so you're saying it's not really going to be a family tree. It's going to be a family stick.
Right.
More of an Ouroboros.
Exactly.
Oh man. Well, you had another question, Chad, and it was about specificity, and I would love it if you would give a crack at explaining this one.
Can you be specific about that?
Yeah, can you be more specific?
More specific, yeah. So specificity, and I don't remember the original question, but it was basically like it'd be interesting to talk about specificity in AEC. And I don't mean specifications, but actual the pedantic side of specificity. For instance, ACT, acoustic ceiling tile, versus ACP, acoustic ceiling panel, which a lot of people use interchangeably, even though they are very different products. Like there's a ASTM that specifically defines the difference for CMU and cinder block, which people still say cinder block. I don't think it's been made for 50 years, probably more than that now.
Right.
So just that kind of thing, because your document sets are legal documents. That's why they're signed and stamped. Like that's as legally binding as a contract. And there's coming from an office for a long time, and now on the consulting side, you hear that stuff of, oh, well, they know what we mean, they being the contractor.
Yeah.
And that's always followed later in the day by, the contractor's an idiot. Why can't they do it right?
Right.
Well, it's because you're not giving him the information.
Right.
And I can promise you
Sometimes.
that the
And
contractor's saying
sometimes
the
they
exact
are an
same
idiot.
thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes they are, yes. Sometimes the architect's an idiot.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, and I'm skimming through my notes on this, and I have a whole bunch of stuff ranging from people not defining the rough opening for a storefront in a wall, especially masonry. And I have a whole story there, dimensioning or even layout on the job site. I had a job where the plumber did their underground work, and they started at the left side of the building, poured the slab, the framer put the walls up, he started on the right side of the building. Well, when you get to that last wall, there's a pipe 3 inches out of the wall. It's like, what's going on here?
Didn't add up.
Now, in this case, it was a mechanical room, so it wasn't an issue. But like if that was an ADA room, that's a really big problem.
Chad, this is where my saying comes in. If you can jump it, you can cock it.
All right.
I have never heard that. That's amazing. I've got to write that down. Hang on. Here's my notepad.
You can fill anything with cock. Yeah, so you're 3 inches off, just fur it out. Let's solve this problem.
Unless you're dealing with ADA clearances.
Yes.
Because they are frequently the exact width.
Yes. Oh, they're never right. I mean, everybody dimensions. They don't take all of the finishes into account.
That was exactly where I was going. See, now you're about to open up a completely different conversation.
This is what the question's about right here. I knew you were
it's just
like
how do you,
Cormac.
how do you even, because we just had this, and they're like, yeah, we dimensioned basically center line of stud to center line of stud. I'm like, okay, well, but how do you?
Why?
Who lays that out?
Don't even get me started with all that.
Okay.
Why is certainly the question, because then I go back in and, well, first of all, did you model the partitions with the finishes and everything else correctly? Because, the thing about it is that your clearances are going to be determined by the finish face to finish face. And I'm not saying that you have to, dimension to finish face to finish face, but you need to verify that that room, especially that ADA room, does have all of that. And you do better not to time
I'm time outing you because this just goes back into an episode that we just had where you you wanted 1/8 inch reveals in a glass panel wall, right? And like these things aren't built. They're not. So yes, you have to dimension to finish face of final finishes, but also there's no room for error a lot of times, right?
Here's actually a more interesting. I don't know if it's a more interesting way to go, but it is something that we should talk about though, because Evan is a proponent of, and you can't tell me I'm wrong because we've talked about it enough that I know that I'm not, that we take less specificity out and create more design intent, because then there's the shop drawing process and all of these other things that's where a lot of that information is coming from. So if I were to say, okay, well, here is my finish opening for that window, and this is what I want. However, you, Mr. Contractor, are supposed to figure out all of this other stuff because you're the one building it. Do we go that way? Because it sounds like you're thinking, and probably because I have too, that you do kind of like draw it and detail it out to the nth degree of it's just like, okay, look, if this is what I want, I need to understand that because of the systems and the rough opening and the daylight opening and all these other things are very specific to what I want. I need to understand all of those and draw them out. Right?
Are you talking to Chad right now? I think you're talking to Chad.
I am talking to Chad.
Yeah,
but,
because I mean, he's a BIM guru, right? And I'll bring this up because I think Chad will shake his head and be like what? We had a conversation that took at least 2 days, maybe 3 days, when we started a new high school in BIM, and the question was nominal or actual about because
gosh,
it was
I've had that
it was
conversation.
mostly
Why is that
it was mostly
Oh
a
my God.
CMU project. And that was a conversation. And you know exactly who was fighting for which side of that equation. You know exactly who was fighting for that side of the equation, right? And you know the reasoning behind it. Oh, well, the contractors are used to this. And it was just like, are you serious? Like today?
I want to hear Chad's griefs because I mean, he had that visceral reaction, and we all have had that visceral reaction. So I'm curious.
I have several thoughts on that. For one, I'm a big masonry nerd. Like I have a stack of books on the shelf up there that are all masonry. But let me find my note because I actually have a note specific to this. I did a hotel, and this was I forget if this was all in CAD or if it was being remodeled in Revit. But it was like right when we had started using Revit.
Take a
And
pause
these
for just a
hotels-
second. I just want to say, because I know there's like students, I'm calling them kids, listening to this who don't even know what we're talking about. Nominal versus actual. So if you can cover that
Yes.
while you're talking about your library here.
Yes. Okay. We'll start that first because I'll forget otherwise because I'll ramble. Nominal and actual refers to things like masonry and wood studs in particular. So a 2x4 wood stud, that's the nominal dimension. Nominally 2 inches by 4 inches. If you actually take a caliper or a ruler and measure it, I wouldn't use a caliper.
No, you.
It's,
How
it's
old
one
is
and
it?
a half.
Is it in Home Depot?
Yeah. And it's so that 2x4 is actually 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches, which is the actual dimension. Masonry, in the instance of CMU, concrete masonry, it's 7 5/8 by 15 5/8 by 7 5/8 tall would be a standard block. Obviously, there's 6 inch and 12 inch and so on and so forth.
And that's actual, not nominal.
Correct.
As we would say, an 8 by 8 by 16 or whatever.
Yeah. So, and this is actually more about rounding, but it applies because that 1/8 of an inch in your nominal wall, every dimension you have an 1/8 of an inch times however many walls, and it adds up real fast. 8 of those walls is an inch somewhere. That's wrong.
Yeah.
But we did a hotel project. This is a standard prototype like Holiday Inn. And if you've never worked on those, basically the brand sends drawings with all their stuff, like all the casework. Here's the layout. And then the architect basically just has to put it together. So we get the plans, and for sake of argument, because I don't remember, we're going to say I was putting it into Revit. And so I'm going through, and they're usually pretty standardized. The wall, the rooms are 12 feet wide, say. And I'm going through and adding this up, 12 feet, 12 feet, 12 feet. And I take my overall dimension, and it's like 2 feet longer than the overall in the CAD file. It's like, I messed up somewhere. Check it all again. The CAD file dimensions had been rounded to like 1/4 of an inch, and they were all wrong. And so the building was like 2 feet longer than the individual dimensions. So, and that's why when you ask about nominal versus actual for your block,
because
I'm
adds
very
up.
opposed. Yes.
And what's
very
crazy,
quickly.
What's crazy is it's like, oh well, we got to change out this chipboard for 5/8, not 1/2 inch anymore. Or now we need 2 layers, and this kind of stuff just happens. It happens all the time. It happens all over the place, and
plus you have your construction tolerances.
Exactly. I've told the story on the podcast before where
can be a lot.
The guy who built the pool in my backyard said, only at 1 foot increments. You're only allowed to have it at 1 foot because the guys that I use don't know how to read a tape measure. And so it was because it was like, we're staking it out. I'm 11 and 4 3/8. And he's like, no, 11 feet. I'm like, what are you talking about? And yeah, so he was very much the nominal guy.
It's like you're not getting that 4 3/8.
Not getting the 4 3/8.
Well, I mean, and then go even further. Want to talk about masonry nerdedom? Think about the fact that if you're, a lot of times we're using a cavity wall with a masonry backup, so CMU backup, your waterproofing, your air barrier, your insulation, and all that other stuff, and then your brick veneer. And obviously the brick has a corresponding coursing that can work well with CMU if you know how to work the two together, but then there's plenty who don't, and they're just, I've had so many people who are like, well, can't they just cut, like, exactly,
yes, right.
It's just like, well
just
can't they just
brick.
cut this? You're like, no. Like,
I've cut brick, and even with an electric saw, it's not fast.
Yeah.
Unless you use the big one with like the 4-foot blade, then it's real fast.
But then you just ask the question, just like, well, do you know what that means later on? It's just like, now they follow that string all the way down, and is it matching up later on down the road when you're cutting this one little sliver here because you want this to be that kind of like jam or seal condition or whatever, and you're just like, there are things that inherently work well together. I mean, stud. I mean, if you do like a cavity wall with like metal stud, I mean, it's a lot easier than CMU, but the CMU and brick go well together, great together.
Imagine that.
It's interesting too, like, to be a good technician when you're drafting this stuff, you do need to know, like Chad, you're talking about CMU, right? It's 15 5/8, but it's 16 with the mortar, right? And then which openings don't have the mortar, right? That's the end of a block. And that's where things get tricky. And like, people who lay these out need to know that stuff, because it's like, if you're laying out 2x4 framing, like, the length, cut it whatever you want. The width, it's 3.5.
Yeah.
If you dimension to the center of the stud, how do you know where the center of a stud is on a construction site? It's wood. It's a solid piece of wood. And then what? You're going to dimension out like 1 3/4 of an inch to draw a line? Like, no, right? And so it's all of these things compound throughout a project. And if you screw one of those details up, talking about specificity, right, early on, the ripple on effects can be enormous. Like, to your point, the building is 2 feet longer than it's supposed to be. Somebody's using generic walls instead of walls with finishes in Revit, right? And you just swap those out at the end, and all of a sudden you don't meet your ADA clearances in the restroom. Going back to construction tolerances, like that, like, what the real world is not CAD, right? It is not BIM. And I mean, I'm on a big project. I mean, it depends. It really depends on the contractor, but you could be an inch away from where you're supposed to be and be acceptable. And you could be 1/8 of an inch too shy, and it's completely unacceptable, right? It's like, there's just so much nuance in this aspect of the profession.
Yeah.
You can even take it further, as like when somebody is like doing this schematic or design development, but they're just doing the design side of things, and they're like, well, I want it to be this, I want it to be this, I want it to be this. Then you've got your technical architect who's coming in and saying, yeah, you can't have it that way because that's not what the material can do, or that's not the dimension that you're going to get, or whatever. And like, no, I want it this way. It's just like, okay, well, then you probably should have designed it the way, taking into account the understanding of like the materials that you're using, which is another big, long conversation of, the designer versus the technical architect versus
but if you think about the tools, and you guys both live in these tools every day, so I mean, but my argument was always like, I mean, Revit forces you to make a lot of decisions way earlier than you're comfortable as a designer making, right? So what's a wall? I don't know yet. I don't know what it is. Is it CMU? Is it 2x4 wood framing? Is it curtain wall? I don't know. Like, does it need wind braces? Does it need all this stuff? I don't know. And so then you get more and more specific, and things start to break over time as well, right? Because all of a sudden your areas don't add up, your net areas, your gross areas, whatever it is, and you do start nudging things to make them quote unquote what they need to be because it's political, who gets the bigger office. Like there's just all of these weird things going into synthesizing an actual design. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there because I think a lot of times like it's too constraining up front, is not enough freedom, and we do it anyway, and it bites us in the ass later.
I don't necessarily think I was thinking that way. I think that there's an interesting compartmentalization of like job roles in the profession these days, where there used to just be this title called an architect. And the architect was a designer, was the technical guy, was this, was that, understood all of these different things. And so when they were designing, they could be designing in brick, they could be designing in CMU, they could be designing in wood. But when they're designing, they kind of understand a lot of those, the inherent nature of a variety of different things. And so it could be interchangeable. So you're not stealing the freedom of your design by understanding that. Now it's become so siloed of like, you're going to be the designer, you're going to be this, you're going to be that. And it's kind of like assembly line architecture.
Right.
And then when you get further down the assembly line, the person who's like actually like, you know, putting the bumper on and screwing it on, it's like, oh, but it doesn't fit because
the mounting holes are not in the right place.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, and so that's in my opinion, this goes much, much broader than just us talking about specificity. It's actually talking about core knowledge of an architect and other things. It's because, you know, I kind of, you know, I've always been a generalist. I've been the designer all the way through the CA guy. And it sounds, Chad, like you have a similar experience where you've been on like every point. And I know, Evan, you have as well. And so, you know, like when you do silo yourself in doing one thing, you're also thinking about what you will be doing later on down the road. And once you get to that next stage of the assembly line, but you're thinking about all of these things, and not as a constraint, but just
hopefully
as
thinking.
Hopefully thinking. You know, I'm trying to be
Best case
optimistic
scenario.
here.
Yeah.
You know, well, you know, well, I mean, I look at, okay, all right, I just borrowed I have a book.
It's in your possession.
In my possession. And I'm flipping through and I'm looking at the finished product, and I'm looking at the sketches, and I'm looking at things, and you could see that Alto was like drawing with the understanding of like how it ultimately will go together. I mean, these beautiful free-form sketches, and they were flowing and they were beautiful, and you know, he was apparently famous for using the 6B pencil. But you know, you look at that, and you can then look at like the actual technical drawings of it, and you're like, yeah, like he saw all of that weaving its way all the way to the very end, and what it would actually be as a constructed element. And this kind of like compartmentalization of knowledge in architecture these days is something that I'm kind of, I somewhat lament. This is the old man yelling at the clouds kind of, you know, spiel here, so bear with me, but it's like everybody sort of they were general jack of all trades kind of person, and we're losing that general jack of all trades kind of person. Everybody has to specialize in something to make like their job viable, and we're losing the generalist that kind of understood everything. It's just my observation. So, you know,
some of that, at least in my experience, has to do with where you work. You know, if you get out of school and your first job is at a 5-person firm, which you're going to be doing a lot. Yeah, I think actually the 5th hire in the company like ever.
Me too.
When I started. You're just going to be doing a lot more just by the nature of the job, because you don't have someone there who's spent 20 years specializing in storefront and flashing.
Right.
You have people that have to get jobs out every day, and they don't have the bandwidth to do it. You know, and even like me, and I'm sure you did, I found the parts that I really liked, and I studied those, but I still know how to put a building together. Maybe not perfectly, but I know that it's not perfect, and I would give it to someone to look at, because my ego's big, but it's not that big.
Yeah.
You're not claiming perfection.
No, not on that.
Progress over perfection.
Yes. learn something new every time.
Speaking of
Hopefully.
specificity, Chad, I'm curious from what your perspective is on kind of BIM and LOD and all of those things where there's just this it seems to me
All
like,
right,
the trend
I'm
is,
getting up and leaving.
all right, see you later. The trend is like more, more, more.
Yes.
And so I'm curious from your perspective if you think that this is the right way to achieve that, or if this is just kind of a fool's errand. Like where do we fall on the spectrum of constantly trying to shove more into these models and there, I mean, it's not just stuff, it's time too, right? It's coordinating all that. It's being that specific about all of these things. And
It so I Aaron Mahler said something once, and I don't remember if it was just he and I talking at an event one time or if it was on a forum, but people were talking about LOD, and he's like, I don't like that term. It's like, I prefer level of expectation. It's not that, oh, here's this LOD and it's LOD, and I don't know what the LOD breakdowns are off the top of my head, but
300, 350, 400.
well, I know the numbers, but I don't know.
And I can explain to you exactly what each of those are.
Okay. Well, so we'll
based off
use,
of like
put your glasses
design
up.
intent.
yeah.
Like, let me
So
tell you
if-
about LOD.
Look at if you look at like your keyboard.
Trust me, we had.
I can model a keyboard, and I can just model basically a box, and then I can model a blob for each set of keys, and then I can model each key, and none of that matters. And a keyboard is maybe not the best example, but it's simple and it's right in front of me. But the LOD for that level, what would it be? 200 would be the box, 300 be the blobs, I think. Like, what matters is what do I need that element to do and show. Like, I don't need to see the keys except in a rendering. The keys are irrelevant outside of a rendering. So I need that keyboard to represent the object
Taking
to
up
a
space.
specific point.
Right.
Yeah. Your doors, they all have a clearance. There's the door swing, but then there's whatever ADA clearances are required. So, and I stole it from Aaron again. All of my doors used to have the firm I built in ADA boxes, and it was adjustable. You just go down your ANSI list. It's like, oh, this is this door. It's option B. You change it, and it changes the size. It fits the door. And people would never use it. I don't know why. It was on by default. And then, would go through it, and they would get flagged in review because something. It's like, guys, the stuff's there. You just don't turn it off. And I totally tangent there. So I like the expectation. It's what do you expect this to be?
Right.
Is this something just to show that this object exists in space and it has a clearance? It's your air handler. I don't need the air handler modeled. I need a box, and I need to know how much space I need around it.
My contention in kind of the whole LOD discussion is when, contractors and, working on an international project where they really are looking for a higher level of detail than what we would traditionally do, because a permit set is typically an LOD 300. There's design intent, there's all sorts of specific information and things like that, and but we're doing things, typically when we're getting to the higher level of detail, we are we're using basis of design. And so when you design around a basis of design, obviously your specs are going to call for the or approved equals kind of thing. And you've spent so much time toiling over, sweating over details of a specific door. Say you've designed everything around Conair, and they decide that they're going to go with YKK, and it's got a completely different profile, completely different like stick size and all of this other stuff. And so now, like, all of the detail, all of the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into that detail are out the window. And so literally you could have wasted, I don't know, say months upon months upon months of that level of detail for it to just be thrown out the window because they changed the basis of design on you. And so, you get to the point of, it's just like, here's our design intent. Here is enough information to get you to that point. But then
you figure it out.
How much further should you go?
I lean, it depends on what it is. So for instance, your elevator, If I'm doing the design, especially the early design, I'm going to find the largest 3,500-pound elevator shaft I can and design around that, because I can always make it smaller. That's easy. I've seen multiple jobs where contractors on up front, we're going to use ThyssenKrupp. Okay.
Yep.
They go out to bid it. Oh, Kone's cheaper. We're using Kone. Guys, the elevator shaft just got 6 inches wider.
Right.
That's a problem. Like you.
Oh, and by the way, it's
footings.
right. By the way, it's right next to the ADA bathroom.
Oh, always. So yeah,
Or
like
the exit stair.
yeah. For something for something like that, I always go for the biggest thing possible, because you can always shrink it. That's easy to do.
Right.
And then I talked to a friend about this, and something he mentioned was level of expected standard of care, which, and I know
This is getting
standard
to be a
of
long
care is-
acronym.
yeah, less Zuck. And it's his comment was, what's reasonable relative to the fee? If you're only charging a 1% fee, I'm not going to the effort to detail out
Everything.
that Kwanir and then switch it, but it's not in the fee. And then what does the owner and the GC expect relative to that fee, which they frequently don't line up, because kind of like you mentioned in the very beginning, people don't understand what we do.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's all on the computer. Can't you just push that button?
Well,
Yeah,
I think what's
yeah.
interesting about this, and the reason I bring it up is kind of a technology issue, is because like the tool allows it. Like it's not necessarily
Yes.
easy, but it allows it. And then there are certain
Yeah.
people, like there's a lot of owners who think they want that. And they maybe don't even know why they think they want that, right? They've been told by somebody, you need to get a 400 level model or whatever, because more is better. And because we're going to do facilities management with this, and they're not, right? You just kind of you can read it from a mile away. It's like you don't need that at all. Like they want a BIM model. Like what does that mean? That could mean any number of things. And
Yeah.
and one thing that I thought was really interesting, I recently talked to John Cerrone again from Shop Architects, and Shop does this thing that I thought, they're freaking smart people, right? Like
Yes.
the way that they operate is they're trying to get to a point where you don't need two-dimensional representation. You don't need abstraction. Like they
Right.
run away from abstraction, basically, is what they're saying. But what that doesn't mean is modeling to the nth degree. It does not mean that. What it means is there's like this control model that is like surfaces, and things get hosted to those surfaces. Assemblies get hosted to those surfaces. So you can easily move this kind of lightweight version of the model, which is design intent. It is a design intent model. And then actual assemblies get hosted to all those things, floors, walls, ceilings, whatever those things are. And those things can get swapped out, because all they're doing is basically looking at the host and saying, where do I need to be, right? So the actual thing can be way heavier weight and get applied to those lightweight surfaces. You move the surface, everything moves with it, and maybe it turns red and says, this doesn't work anymore, kind of a thing, right? That this thing that you specified should be hosted to this surface doesn't work anymore. I feel like that is kind of a neat way to think about this, because the big problem here is you spent, like Cormac said, you spend all this time chasing these things down, getting super specific, and then somebody changes their mind, or the bid comes in, or whatever it is, and like, let's swap this out. And it's like, holy crap, where do we start trying to solve this new set of problems? Because there's so many, it's broken
Right.
for quite a ways beyond the point where we just made that change. So I felt like this kind of a way of working that is pretty interesting, and the tool that most people use don't allow for that to happen, right? Like there's just no way to use a Revit for that kind of a thing, because if you want to move the thing and somebody linked to the ceiling, they pinned the ceiling to it, or they didn't, or whatever. Like now you actually have to do this still. That is very manual, this whole thing, that you have to go through and check all the views And hopefully
Yeah.
nobody did any 2D drafting on any of that stuff, because they did, right? But in some other view, and that's broken too, right? Because it was just covering something up. I feel like that this is kind of this weird thing that we've gotten ourselves into, but because I feel like this kind of lightweight model idea really starts to get back to the earlier days of hand drafting and design intent, because they're lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you mentioned it, Chad, right? Like the thickness of a pencil line was like an inch thick, but the dimension made it real, right? The dimension
Yeah.
gave it position in space.
Yes.
And I feel like
Well,
this gets
I
us
have to credit
closer
that.
back to that than where we're going right now with the current tool set.
That particular quote you were saying was Michael Freert, and I apologize if I mispronounced that. I had a conversation with him about something else entirely a while back, but he brought that up. But yeah, and he says, with a pen, your lines are actually an inch thick, so the dimension made it real. And in CAD, we're used to fixing overall dimensions and expecting that it wasn't real, so then it just kind of carried through. And then he says BIM is real, which I agree. So, which goes back to the nominal versus actual.
Mm-hmm.
So cleaning up problems, yeah,
It's hairy.
it can get rough.
It's super, and it's not it's something you can actually get paid for, right? Like you have to bury
Yeah.
those, you have to burn those hours somewhere, but you still have
Yeah.
to do them. Like Cormac, that's the thing, right? Is like that wasn't in the changing that idea this late in the process wasn't in the contract.
Some of that stuff can be handled if you model, I'm going to say intelligently. You can nest details into your profiles, for instance, for your storefront. So all you do is swap the profile or swap your storefront curtain wall type, and theoretically the detail's there, and you just have to make some tweaks because your mullion's a little different, so you have to fix your flashing, as an example.
But you have to be like a pretty BIM expert to be able to get to the point where you can do that and feel confident in it too. It's a role like that's pretty specific
Yes,
to a
yeah,
firm.
yeah.
Or you have to hire Reed Thomas to do that for you.
Yes, or one of the many other wonderful people out there, but hire Reed Thomas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I wouldn't expect, if a sole practitioner using Revit, I probably wouldn't expect them to be doing that kind of thing unless they either came from a very technical firm previously, or they, some people are just big nerds and like getting into the weeds like that.
Yeah.
But if you're at, giant 10,000 person mega firm, I don't know what they do, but I would hope that they're doing something like that.
Yeah.
Which with shop, sounds roughly like what you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first thing I thought of. Is they have the family for, say, the window, and then the detail parts are just nested into that window.
Yeah,
Would
I
be
even feel like it's
the how.
There's this interesting lecture that I had a guest lecturer come into one of my classes that I taught a long time ago, and Terry Moore is her name, and she was talking about using what's the name of like the industrial design application that Autodesk Inventor. She was using Inventor at the time, and it has this idea of control surfaces. And it's very much like what John was explaining when I was talking to him at shop, but in an architectural sense. And I think this has been something that's been more in the aerospace and the automotive space for a long time, right? It's like, yeah, you have these control surfaces and everything is kind of constrained to those. You move the surface, everything moves with it. And I just feel like that actually was, that's a really smart way to work. Why haven't we adopted that methodology in the tools that we use? Because things always do change. That's the constant, right? Change is the constant on these projects. Decisions get made and then they change, and we all have to kind of go back through that process. And sometimes it's so difficult to find all of the things that affected throughout the whole project. So anyway.
Yeah, some of that is, it's just a very slow industry to change, given that people still want to use nominal mix and read dimensions in 2025.
Yeah.
in a Revit project.
Or dimension to the center of a stud wall, right?
Aye.
That's the way we've always done it. I mean, that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's a boat anchor.
And like we talked about when we chatted briefly, like there are instances where a center line dimension is the correct thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for your general framing plan, though.
No,
It's for the TV on the wall. Center it.
exactly.
Great.
Yep.
And I'm not afraid. And I've talked about the dimensioning with, who was it? I think it was Brian Mackey. And I think he said he used to do some framing, and he's like, oh, how was it? No, it wasn't center lines. I think he preferred where your dimension string actually includes the stud width versus I prefer
So
go
both
to
sides.
one face of the stud.
Both
Yeah,
sides
he
of
did
the
both
stud.
faces.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I think I hope I'm not misquoting
I've
him.
talked to a contractor about that, and their first question was, well, is it wood or metal? And so
Yeah.
if it's wood,
I mean-
it's to the edge. But if it was metal, they're like, okay, center line's fine, because they've got in the track, they've got holes cut out and they can actually see it.
Ah,
Right. And so it depends. Like that's actually the right thing
Yeah.
is ask the contractor.
yeah, that's a lot of the standards that I put together for the office were because I would go out to job sites and just sit down and talk to the contractor. Like, hey, like, I know my part of the job. I don't know your part. What can we do to make this easier? And it really came down to the fact that I didn't want phone calls during the day, because that usually means something's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't like that. Obviously, if there's a fire, like, call me, but I don't want phone calls because I dimensioned to the center lines and now I have to redo everything.
Yeah.
And I would just literally sit down. It's like, what can we do? Like, how can we make this process easier for the next job?
Yeah.
Obviously this one's out. I can't change it. But for the next project, what can I do? What can we do as a designer or a firm or an industry to make the process easier? And it's, in this case, the guy I talked to was a framer before becoming a GC. He's like, start on your outside face and just go one face, because he'll drop a chalk line, line up the edge of the stud, nail it down. It's fast. It's easy. I don't think I ever set sill plates when I was doing habitat stuff, but I know they do basically that. And they're dealing with people that have no experience. So that shows that's an easy way to lay it out. You just line up this face, basically line the corners, and occasionally you have to nudge it in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But
Because you bought that sill plate at Home Depot. That's why.
yes,
You saying it's crooked?
I'm saying it's warped and twisted. Yes. And still wet.
Yeah.
I don't know what the weather is in Detroit, but around here it's very wet.
Yeah.
Where are
Well,
you? You're in
Chad, I don't think we answered your questions.
no, but it was a fun discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these are the kinds of discussions that I think make sense to put out into the world in a podcast, because these are the kinds of discussions that happen in offices. And on one level, it's like these are the discussions that should be happening in public. And on another level, you're like, how come we haven't figured this out yet?
Because
the profession, the industry. It's crazy.
because people are insular, and I don't want to share my trade secrets.
Yeah.
And you're like, that everybody else is basically using the same materials and stuff that you're using.
Yeah,
Tools.
we're all buying our studs from Home Depot.
Exactly.
Not a
So
sponsor.
build it.
Well, thanks for the questions, man. This has been a fun conversation for sure.
Yeah.
And there's just so much in there that I feel like people will be nodding their heads with and shaking their fists at, and there will be young people who it's the first time they've ever heard that, and they won't walk into a situation in an office where that's new information. So to me, that's the value in having these kinds of conversations for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking the
It's
questions.
great.